living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Welcome to Toward Anarchy. Thank you so much for joining me. It is my pleasure, as always, to be here each week. I'm Michael Storm, and we do this live every Sunday at 1 p.m. worldwide across the Republic Broadcasting Network. And really, truly, just the best thing I do all week. And I do a lot of stuff. I participate. I'm out there. I'm in it. I'm working it every single day. As always, go to towardanarchy.com to follow along, and you can find us in all the usual places at Toward Anarchy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the usual places, and some others if you go looking for us. Just at Toward Anarchy anywhere. Type Toward Anarchy in any search engine, and 9 times out of 10, it's me. Quite literally, about 9 times out of 10. And you can subscribe. Excuse me. Try to choke to death there. A little wash it down a little bit. Get the coffee going. Okay, that's a little bit better. You can subscribe to the newsletter. That's just the best way to stay in touch and let me know that you're out there. I see when you open. I don't see when you open the letter, but it lets me know that you're looking, and it lets me know that you're clicking on things, and so I know that you're still there. Really easy to do at towardanarchy.com. And as always, if you're trying to figure out what's going on with the show, with the episodes, you want to follow along, you want to find the links, you want to find out information about the guest. If it's not right there on the front page, if you're not with me live, click the episodes button, look for 2023, look for September, and today is the 10th, and there you'll have it. It'll all be right there in front of you. All the links, all the fun things that I shared today, the quotes, it's all right there for you at your fingertips. And really a fun thing planned out for today. I'm really looking forward to this and have been for a while. I got to pull up this before we dive into this real quick. I get this thing here that it was something that stuck in my craw here this last week, and I just have to get it out really quick because I think it actually is a good introduction into the guest today and the conversation that we're going to ultimately have. And it's across the social media and around the world of weird out there. There's all this past week there was this weird question of whether or not somebody should shoot a dog, or whether somebody would shoot a dog or shoot a person over a dog. Sorry. To protect their dog, shoot some person, hurt some person, harm some person who was trying to take their dog, hurt their dog. And it just seems like such a silly question to me to ask if someone will use force to protect their property, to protect themselves, to protect the things and people that they love. It seems to me to be a backwards question, and the question it really should be, is it worth losing your life over trying to take what's mine, trying to harm me? That seems like the more realistic question. You shouldn't put me in that position where I have to make a decision whether it's my stuff, my dog, me over you, and any concern I might have for you as a human being. You shouldn't put me in that position. And that particular question, that thing it was all over the TikTok, it was all over the Reels this week. I just kept seeing it pop up, and nobody had that straightforward answer. There were people that, yeah, that's right, you're a real POS if you would shoot a person over a dog. You value a dog's life more than you value a person's life, or you value your property over a person's life. And again, that's just a backwards question. But my guest, he asked a question once, and it went viral. He's asked a lot of questions of the people, but this is one that this is the first question that I heard, the first time that I'd heard of the guest. When he asked the question, when should you shoot a cop? And of course, to me, the answer is really easy. It's a really easy question to answer. That answer is the same time you would shoot anyone else. The costume that the guy is wearing doesn't make up, it doesn't change the crimes, the violations that he's enacting upon somebody. So it was a really simple answer for me, but it was a big to-do. And Larken Rose asked that question some years ago, and I came across it and found it, and I found out who Larken Rose was, and I wanted to have a conversation with him for some time. And finally, we've been able to get him on the show, and he has this fantastic new project that he's been involved in, has been working on for a while, and it's been fun to watch it come together, just sort of from the periphery, like I do everything. And the Jones Plantation film is completed. It's out there. It's the very thinly veiled allegory about our current political reality and the very nature of government itself. And I'm curious to hear about it. And so I went straight to the man himself and found Larken Rose to come on and tell us about the plantation. Larken Rose, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy, and I know you're doing the rounds right now. So it's really cool to get a chance to talk to you like this when I know there's going to be a passion in your voice and a fire in your belly like no other with this fantastic project called the Jones Plantation. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm glad it finally worked.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've been let's see, I've been following you around for a little while on the social media and things, and I've reached out a time or two, and we just never connected, and so it's really great to do so now because you're a huge influence. There are a lot of we run in the same crowds, and I see your name pop up, and I see people talk about your book, and they just have such amazing things to say. Well, okay, most people have amazing things. They're always the haters. But so it's really great to get a chance to talk to you myself and hear from you directly about yourself. And if you will, just a minute to tell us, why you're an anarchist, how you got here, why we would ever be having a conversation about such an important and hopefully future cult hit film.
Okay, I'll try to give the short version here. I was raised sort of conservative, constitutionalist, kind of libertarian leaning, and I already like to debate, and I like to think about things, and I like to ponder philosophy and stuff like that. And I basically, with the help of my first wife, debated myself off the political spectrum entirely, and Tessa at the same time, because all I set out to do was whittle down my view of government to the perfect, legitimate government and what it should be. And along the line, trying to be consistent. And meanwhile, I'm surrounded by everybody who wants more government than I do. So there wasn't a whole lot of people who already wanted less than I did. But trying to whittle it down and saying, well, I don't get to force people to fund it, because that's not okay. You can't say, well, it's for your own good, so I'm going to extort you. Like, that's not legitimate. That's not moral. And I can't, prevent other people from getting their own protection or their own ways to help the poor, build roads or whatever. And so piece by piece, I whittled down the ideal of government until I realized the entire thing was gone. It wasn't government anymore. It was just people being people, and they can organize and cooperate in a million different ways voluntarily, as they should. But that isn't government. Government means a ruling class, authority over a certain people or place, and that necessarily implies coercion and domination. So I I know a lot of people got there sort of debating what would work better, and to me it was completely different. It was, well, what's legitimate and moral? And at the end of the day, I realized ruling classes aren't. There's nothing you can do. Democracies aren't. constitutional republics aren't, like kings aren't, nothing gives anybody the right to rule, which means it can't ever be moral or legitimate. So I accidentally found myself realizing, oops, that kind of makes me an anarchist, because to oppose violent aggression is necessarily to oppose government entirely. So that's how I got there, and that was 27 years ago. So I've been doing this a while.
You've been at it for a couple of days. You've written a number of books. One of the books that people tend to talk about is the I guess it was your first book, and is this the case that you sort of wrote it while in jail? Is that
I assume you're talking about The Most Dangerous Superstition,
right?
Which it wasn't the first, but it's easily the most well known. I started working on that in prison. I was mostly working on The Iron Web, which is a novel, and Kicking the Dragon, which was my story of my adventures with the federal extortion racket. But sort of the seeds of the idea of The Most Dangerous Superstition was already there. I knew I wanted to write it, but I knew I had to delay it long enough that I wouldn't, a year later, think, oh, I could have done that better. So I'm still proud of how it came out, and I think partly that was from intentionally dragging my feet and making sure it said things the way I think they needed to be said. And that's by far the thing I'm most well known for, is The Most Dangerous Superstition.
Yeah, right. And I hear good things about it, and I've cracked it. I've thumbed through it. I purposely I make it a point to not read about these things. I'm one of these people that I absolutely have. There's no question in my mind that you could. I could be out on a desert island somewhere with no concept of the sort of general things that we understand about governments or democracies or communisms or whatever pet name the favorite government ruling class happens to have at the time, and that I would still have the same understanding about reality. It's amazing what you've done is you've taken and you removed the uniforms and the titles and the presentation and the pomp and circumstance of flashy government and authority, and said that underneath all of these names and descriptions and rules and laws is just simple control, people trying to manipulate other people for whatever their various reasons. And there's some historical, I guess this is what you find out when you start looking around, right? There must be some historical reason why this happens, or some historical evidence of this being a regular thing that happens. And then you start looking at, well, maybe it's not about history, maybe it's not about what these guys wrote down in this book, maybe it's about human nature, maybe there's no way that you can create a system like this, call it whatever you want, and pretend that it isn't violating other people, and that there isn't a class of people involved in this that absolutely know or don't give a damn that they are violating other people.
Yeah, and it's been a long, long time since anybody could dominate a huge number of people by just brute force. Mm-hmm. Thanks largely to the advent of the firearm. It makes it really hard to subjugate people who don't want to be subjugated. And so the art, it's kind of an insult to call it that, the art of enslaving minds is many centuries old, and it's practiced around the world. And that's really the focus of the Jones Plantation. The movie is to show people the art of mental enslavement that has been used on them, and why it is way worse and way more destructive and powerful than mere, physical, I'm going to chain you to this tree and make you work. If somebody does that, everybody, the victim and everybody else, recognizes, well, that's really, really bad. Whoever did that to you was a really bad person. And if that person goes, I'm not sure I can get away with this too long, what if I can convince them that he has a moral obligation to work for me, that there's some special arrangement, and I'm going to start, doing rituals and elections and constitutions and all sorts of fun stuff to make the people think that I have the right to do this. Instead of everybody hating me because I chained a guy to a tree, I'm going to make everybody love me and come to me and think I should be ruling them, and that they should be paying tribute to me. And so that's basically human history for the last however many thousand years in a nutshell. And the purpose of the Jones Plantation movie is to show people an allegory that just smacks them upside the head with what they have all been falling for, what's been used on them and what has been working on them. And it's designed to make people see through that.
Was this something that you always wanted to do, or did it just, was it happenstance? You were like, we have the opportunity, let's take this to the next level, let's make this film.
It was funny because I made a little animated thing called the Jones Plantation, which is still on my YouTube channel, like 12 years ago or something. I forget exactly. It's just a little 10-minute thing. It's the allegory. It's little illustrations. It's sort of a slideshow, and somebody else narrated it. I wrote it and gave it to them, and I just edited it together. And so lots of people have seen just that silly little thing and said, whoa, that was really powerful. And a number of people have even said, like, that started me on my journey to give up statism. Well, it wasn't until a gazillion years later when Andrew Treglia, who's the director of the movie, interviewed me down in Mexico. And one of the things I mentioned in the interview was my Jones Plantation, the little animated one. And when he watched that, it was actually his idea. First he said, why don't we make a live-action short film of this? And then 2 seconds later, we both realized it's not going to fit in a short film. We need a whole stick-in movie. We'll be lucky if we can fit it all into one movie. I think the original script would have been about 3 hours long, so we're like, okay, we have to hack that down. So it was like I did the allegory forever ago, but it was actually his idea to make it a movie. And as soon as he said it, I wish it was my idea. Yeah, because right. that setting and that premise gives so much room to cover so many different things. And the people who've seen it know how much stuff we crammed into that, like 110 minutes, because it's more comfortable for people to watch a supposedly fictional story and come to realizations on their own about how much that parallels the world they're living in than it is to just tell them outright, yeah, you're being treated like a slave, you're being manipulated, you're falling for it. You know, people get defensive. No, I'm not. This is the land of the free and the will of the people and yada, yada, yada.
Well, it's kind of funny because you're quite literally doing what you're talking about in the film. You're sort of, here's the presentation, I'm going to let you decide. No, I absolutely. I think there's a lot of value in art. I think I'm sure you know this in the circles that we run in. There are a lot of people who credit, George Carlin or somebody like that, somebody who stood up and put some words down, put some things down on tape and on film, and said this is the way they are, and sort of in no uncertain terms, without really pointing any fingers at the listener. And that's the toughest thing to do. I think it's the biggest problem that we have with people interacting on social media is their inability to talk about the issue, instead of direct their sort of responses at the individual. And I'm guilty of it myself, doing it at times, instead of concentrating on the facts. You just sort of slip off into that zone where you're missing the point, and you got to bring it back. And that's what's so great about something like the Jones Plantation film. And your book, what you're talking about is sort of the idea of making sure that this thing it's saying the right thing, taking the time to put the right words in there, and just plant those seeds, as we always talk about, and let them grow within people. Let it seep in through the subconscious.
Yeah, and I think that it's difficult for a lot of people, including myself, if I don't intentionally not do this. It's difficult to separate the person you're talking from, the person you're talking to, from the garbage they've been taught. And the reason I'm actually really optimistic is having come to the realization that the vast majority of people are voluntarists inside already. They just have this pile of authoritarian garbage they were taught. But they don't they didn't come up with it on their own. They didn't decide, you know what we need? We need to be violently dominated by a bunch of sociopaths. They had to be taught these things. They had to have it bashed through their skull day in and day out since before they could even talk to learn the insanity of authoritarianism. And so things like the Jones Plantation or my book, or I made a course called Candles in the Dark, which is about teaching voluntarists how to talk to the rest of the world without them getting defensive and flipping out. But I think the key is to understand that almost everybody you talk to, even if they're advocates of authoritarian injustice, they're also victims of it. They're just repeating a lie that they were taught. They didn't come up with it on their own. They're doing what they think is right. Now, their view of right and wrong is totally warped by their statist indoctrination. And so getting them to see through the tricks so that they realize that what they really are and what they really believe in doesn't match the government garbage they were taught and the legalese garbage they were taught and the authoritarian garbage they were taught, that the real them is on our side. And to me, one of the things that's most painful to watch, and the Jones Plantation movie shows this, I think, rather well in a couple scenes, is when you have well-intentioned, decent people making excuses for their abusers and even defending their abusers and attacking the only people who actually want them to be free. And it's just because they don't understand the game. They don't understand what's been done to them. They take pride in obedience to sociopaths. Well, I'm a law-abiding taxpayer. And they think that equals good person. No, that's not how that works. And so almost everything I do is trying to help people see through the game that has been played on them. Because if the well-intentioned people who've been falling for this for centuries and centuries stop falling for it, the tyrants have no power. Like, their victims outnumber them a gazillion to one. But we go along, and most of us act as collaborators or even enforcers because those people fell for the game. And if they see through the trick, that's when the trick stops working on them. So Jones Plantation is all about showing people, here are the tricks that complete sociopaths will use to dominate and control you. And then once you recognize it, you have to figure out what to do about it.
Well, and it's a tricky thing, right? Because everybody's looking for that kill switch. Everybody's looking for that one thing, the smoking gun, evidence, whatever it is, the one thing that's just going to nail down and it's going to wake everybody up. And everybody, all of a sudden, we're going to wake up tomorrow morning and everybody's just be, oh, well, this is BS and this isn't going to work. We can't do this anymore. There's got to be another way. And that's never going to happen. So the real effort has to be like yours. It has to be that constant, let's keep improving. Let's find the new message. Let's find the new idea. Let's find the way to reach somebody, whether it's through a technology. Okay, here, this is funny. I have to bring this up. I would completely skip this entirely, but I have to bring this up because it's actually kind of funny. Stephan Kinsella, you're familiar with the gentleman. He's been on the show before, and he, as soon as he heard that I was going to be talking to you, he had to jump in there. And he had to say, well, why don't you ask him about why he's sending out digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown notices to people? Okay, sure, absolutely, I'll do that. And the reason this is funny is because I don't agree with Stephan on the point of digital property. I believe that property is property and that the way you recognize property is really easy. It's not mine, it's somebody else's. And if you respect other people's property, it doesn't matter what form it takes. You respect their property, it's theirs. And we're moving in, of course, to a new paradigm, a new reality where digital, there is things, tokens, there's all these efforts to make digital a reality and tie digital to a reality and find ways of working with and using technology Of course, but as we always have for whatever neat pursuits. But one of the beautiful things I think about it is in artistic pursuits and the ability of the technology to follow the creator or the work to follow the creator to follow the work, or all the way around, back and forth. Through the technology, and for it to be individual and directed to a target and an individual or an audience, and so I have this completely different understanding of how you respect somebody else's property than Stefan does, and especially when it comes to digital things. And I thought it was funny that he would ask me to do this. So I will ask you the question: why would you do such a thing? Did you do such a thing?
Kind of, sort of, not quite, not the way he described it. The funny thing is I probably agree with him a lot more than you agree with him, because in general, the concept of intellectual property I don't think is a thing. For example, if somebody...
Two different things, though, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll elaborate on why.
Yeah.
If somebody like somewhere has a PDF of my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, because there's one out there, and whoever did that did a crummy job of, they used crummy character recognition, so there's typos in it that aren't in the real book. So I'm like, if you're going to swipe it, at least do a good job. I don't think I have the right to beat somebody up for having that PDF without my permission. At the same time, if somebody makes something like we made a movie, I don't think we have some obligation to give it away for free to everybody. And if we're posting it in places and other people are posting it on platforms, which part of the agreement is that you don't post things that other people made without their permission. That's what's on YouTube. It's all over the place. And so for that, yeah, that got reported when people did that on YouTube, because it's not there. Like, they didn't make the thing, and they agreed to that ahead of time. Now, I know it's going to be on torrents all over the place, and that's true of everything. But the main disagreement, because we had a debate, and Patrick Smith was the arbiter, and that was fun. Me and Kinsella, and it was pretty recently about exactly this, and we mostly agreed, except then he got around to claiming that if I make something and don't give it away for free, then I'm the jerk. Because I was basically saying people who grab what other people made and share it all over the place for free when they know the person didn't want that, that's kind of being a jerk. Now, does it justify beating them up? No. But does it kind of make them a jerk? Yeah, because it removes the incentive for people to be creative if you're immediately destroying any financial incentive and things like that. So it wasn't even about this is some firm principle that people should be drawn and quartered. It's just maybe don't be a jerk. If someone's trying to put out pro-freedom media and they're trying to make money off of it because it took a huge amount of effort and time and money to make it, maybe don't be a jerk and just give it away for free. And so that was sort of funny. But I think I may be closer to his position than to yours. But when people post it on a platform...
So here's the thing. So this is actually easily handled when you're talking about... we're talking about property violations. That's what we're talking about. So if there's a property violation, then there are demonstrable damages and a market in which they can be evaluated. And some compensation be judged or given based on that valuation in the marketplace. So for there to be a crime in a digital thing, they would have to actually violate your property or deprive you of monies or income from that property, and that's not what happens in the digital case. So I'm never arguing that there's this intellectual property. Intellectual property is BS. There's no if there's an idea out there and you take your own materials and you make that thing and it's very similar or even exactly like someone else, that's not stealing from somebody. That's going to the art museum and seeing a painting on the wall and going home and repainting your own.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like we're pretty much on the same page.
Yeah. That was my point. Is that ultimately, when it comes down to it, I don't agree with him on one, devaluing other people's. That's the main point. Is the devaluation of other people's property. How I recognize other people's property is it's other people's property. It's not mine, and I respect them because they find value in it, and I'm not going to take it from them. But then in the digital sense, once again, just so there's no confusion with everybody out there, when you're taking a copy, you're not taking something, you're not depriving something. If you have that claim against somebody, then you would have to prove that they violated your property, you broke into your server, took it off your server. That's a crime. You break into somebody's server and take the digital file off of the server. If that person takes it and puts it out over a bunch of servers all over the world and it's easy to copy, that's not a crime. That's not violating you.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think we agree.
Yeah, I agree.
I just thought it was funny. Yeah, I thought it was funny that Stephen would ask that question of me to ask you when he knows that I don't agree with him.
Well, and people can go look up the...
no, go ahead.
They can go look up the debate we had. Again, Patrick Smith hosted it. If you search for our three names, you'll find the debate we had, which was sort of funny.
I'm sure it was. All these things are, right? Well, there's no animosity, right? I mean, you guys don't dislike each other because you disagree on this thing, do you? I guess it happens.
No, yeah, I don't. We're not going to have a shootout or anything. At least I'm not. I hope he's not.
Fair enough. We just have some different ideas. I love the notion that we're experiencing a change in, it's a paradigm shift in moving towards I don't know, will we get there, will we not? A different understanding of what property can be. And it's kind of an interesting test, I think, for people in respecting other people's property. You've got to slip into a break. Talking to Larken Rose. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Republic Broadcasting Network. Real news, real talk, real people. Because you can handle the truth.
Support the network. Go to republicbroadcasting.org, and if you can, if it's within it's the pocketbook says you can do it, the mind says you can do it, just click the donate button. It's as simple as that. Walk through the process, make a donation. It keeps the network going. It's not just me. It's not just this 1 hour that I do here each week. There are dozens of people and shows that air throughout the week across Republic Broadcasting Network, and your donation to the network makes it possible to keep that happening. It pays Sam, helps make it so he can come and spend his time here doing this, pushing the buttons and connecting people with their guests and doing all this production work. Somebody's got to do it. And if the donation thing is a bit much, I understand. Look for the shop. Go to shoprbn.com, or there's the shop button up there at republicbroadcasting.org. Click on that button. That's that win-win situation. You support those people who advertise across the network. Same thing. It works either way. And I appreciate it. I'm very lucky to be here doing this every week. You have no idea. Even as open as I am, the years that we've been doing this and talking about this, you have no idea how lucky I am to just be sitting here right now, having this chat, having this conversation with my guest, Larken Rose. People who consider themselves educated, open-minded, and progressive do not want to think of themselves as slaves of a master or even the subjects of a ruling class. Because of this, much rationalizing and obfuscation has been done in an attempt to deny the fundamental nature of government as a ruling class. My guest said that. It's about the mirror, the smoke and mirrors, right? It's all a show, and then once they put on that show, once you've seen that show a few times and you really don't look behind the curtain, there's the Oz reference. If you don't look at the man behind the curtain, they start doing that, right? They rationalize and they make all sorts of excuses for why it's okay for some guy with a tin badge and a clown costume to rob Cage or murder someone over political or social opinions, and that's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. Larken, what do you think?
Well, they teach not just that it's okay, but that it's necessary, that we'd be like killing and eating each other if there wasn't this giant gang of parasites and a bunch of thugs like stealing a huge chunk of what we produce and bossing us around and controlling every aspect of our lives, to the point where people actually think the good moral thing. They don't just think, well, we better go along so they don't beat us up. They think the good moral thing is to obey the law, because when those crooks make up a threat, it isn't just a guy making a threat. It's the law of the land, like whatever that means. And there's so much of the mythology and rhetoric that people have been surrounded by so long that they can't look at it objectively. And once you're out of that, once you're out of the brainwashing, it looks so ridiculous that I know for myself, I think, why did I ever believe that? I mean, I wasn't a complete idiot before. Why did I think that made any sense at any point? And it's the power of indoctrination and propaganda, that if you're surrounded by an idea and everyone around you believes it, and it's, you're bombarded with it by your parents and your teachers and the media and everything and everybody you're almost certainly going to believe that idea no matter how stupid it is. And the idea of authority in government, the idea that one group of people can have the moral right to forcibly extort and dominate everyone else, that's just insane. There's no rational foundation for it. And the excuses that people spout back are just things that they were taught to memorize and repeat to justify their own subjugation.
Well, and it's
really
circular, too. If they'd stop and think about it for about 2 seconds, it's circular, that that the rationalizing is for the sake of rationalizing for the need to rationalize.
Yeah. Yep. And it just goes around and around until somebody's able to think about it. And so that's what the Jones Plantation smacks people in the head with. But in the setting of, all right, here's this slave plantation, antebellum South, and the slaves are starting to get uppity and realizing this isn't okay, and they're getting mad. And along comes this consultant guy, Mr. Smith, to teach a more effective form of enslaving the human livestock. And, it's totally believable as its own story, but way more importantly, I hope everybody's going to recognize, because it's pretty dang obvious. Like you said, it's so thinly veiled. It's like saran
allegory. Yes. Well, and I think it's important that the Mr. Smith character is who he is, because, one, it's historical. There's a historical reality to the Mr. Smith character in his exercising these skills and controls over the plantations in the South for real. And then there's the very obvious, that he's one of us. We can trust him.
Yeah. And that's one of the most important things to realize. Now, I know what you're referring to. That wasn't the case in the animated one. But very early on in planning the movie, we said, yeah, let's do that. First of all, so people don't mistake what the us versus them that politicians want us to look at is always male versus female and white versus black and rich versus poor and people from different countries versus other countries. And that's not the us versus them that ever matters. And second, it's so important for people to realize that the tyrants and psychos are just people. And one of the characters, the good guy, the one good guy, the one all the way consistent good guy in the movie, points out they're just men, and so are we. Why are we treating them like this? Why are we acting like this is okay? And so that was another reason for that character to be what he is, because not only are they just people, they're not even average people. They're not even decent people. They're like the worst people in the world. And most people kind of know that. Like, they understand, yeah, politicians are all crooked and slimy, but your politician is even slimier than my politician. But they still play the game, and they still cling to the insane notion that for you and I to get along peacefully, we need to give the worst people in the world societal permission to rob and dominate us all. And that's what most people believe. They don't think of it in terms like that, because by the time they get around to recognizing that that's really what they believe for most of their life, then they don't believe it anymore because they recognize how insane it is. But if, to quote Mr. Smith, and this is in the trailer, so this isn't a spoiler, he says you can control a man for a time by brute force, but you cannot own a man until you can convince him that your word is law and that he's obligated to obey and virtuous for doing so.
Right.
And that is the foundation of modern enslavement. It isn't just do what we say or we hurt you. It's do what we say or you're a bad person. And the fact that that worked so well for centuries is just, in a supposedly, like, enlightened, intelligent species, like, how does anybody still believe that? But the good news is that belief is falling apart all over the place. And I don't just mean, like, forever we've had this situation where one regime gets really nasty and people complain and go, this isn't okay. Like, at some point they have some line where they don't put up with it. But what they almost always do is just put up a new ruling class. Look, to me, one of the most depressing things is that in Nazi Germany, the main opposition were communists. Like, that's all you can think of?
That's
which set of authoritarian collectivism you were doomed to begin with, because you can't think outside the box of whose slave should we be. And so that's the challenge, but it's happening now. Like I said, I've been doing this for 27 years, and the number of people I know now who understand it is in the hundreds of thousands. The number I knew then was one. Like, literally one person in the real world who agreed with me. And that was kind of tough to have it be that way for a while, where I'm talking, nobody's listening, because I believed the same things and said the same things. Nobody was paying any attention. But now a whole lot of people are finally escaping the indoctrination and recognizing the whole system is a joke. The whole game is bogus. The problem is not that we don't have the right clown on the throne. The problem is that there's a throne. There needs to not be a throne. We need to treat each other like responsible grown-ups instead of kids whining for who the next teacher should be, controlling the giant global classroom.
Well, the statists are always, they do this every 2 or 4 years or whatever. They throw their little party and they pretend like, they act like, or they actually believe, I'm not entirely convinced which it is yet, that all the problems just kind of started recently. That this hasn't been going on for, say, a couple hundred years, if not, let's look back at Western history before America. None of this is new. There's nothing new in any of this. They changed the names and they point fingers at different, mostly dark-colored people, and blame them and their society and their culture and keep us divided. It's a really weird thing, because if you ask individuals don't buy it. If you can get somebody on a one-on-one conversation and you can get past the black-white, the left-right, whatever, Pepsi, Coke, whatever's keeping them separated for just 2 seconds, and you suddenly realize none of us have, except for the sociopath, which we probably wouldn't associate with anyway. None of us have any desire to be rulers over the other person or make the other person do something. Most of us just really want to be left alone to our own means. And God, we're just tired of getting robbed at every corner and threatened with being caged or even murdered for doing the simplest thing, failing to obey a traffic law.
Right. And the most profound evil part of it is that the tricks, they don't just make the well-intentioned victims go along with it and fund it and obey. It makes them actually cheer for it and advocate it and advocate the enslavement of their fellow man, because they're told, well, you have two choices. You can have Mr. Jones boss you around, or you can have Mr. Johnson boss you around. And either way, you consented because you played this game we set up, which means you should hate anybody who doesn't go along with the rules. And we're going to pretend we serve you. We're going to put on this show. and people eagerly run out. I mean, the last time it was so obvious that almost nobody voted for anybody. Like half the country was like really scared of one crook and voted against them, and the other half was really scared of the other crook and voted against him. But they keep playing the game, so the ruling class can keep going, well, you consented, you played the game, you elected us, you're why we're here, which is a complete ridiculous lie. And it's a lie they've been using forever. Mr. Smith in the movie actually says, this is the people who've pulled the strings of the world for centuries, this is what they know. This is the art they practice. Luckily, they've gotten the tyrants have gotten so bad at the game recently that even a bunch of normal people are like, "What is going on? This can't be okay." And that just astounds me, because my first book was How to Be a Successful Tyrant. It's out of print right now, but it astounds me how lazy and incompetent the rulers have gotten to alienate huge numbers of people who 2 seconds ago were like unthinking, go-with-the-flow, obedient, law-abiding taxpayers. And it's getting to the point where now you have people, and they're all still statists, but you have people like Russell Brand, who came from the political left, who's now bashing both sides. You have people like Tucker Carlson, who came from the right, who's now bashing both sides. Those two are like getting together to bash both sides. And when your propaganda is so bad that some people with huge audiences and then just the general public start to say, I don't like either one of you tyrants. Why is this the system we have? That's when they're in trouble. As long as people play their game inside the paradigm that the tyrants created, which is guaranteed to give nobody any power except them, then they don't care who you vote for and how much you protest and whine and this and that and the other thing. But when the people get around to realizing, there's something just fundamentally wrong about this whole thing, that's when the tyrants are actually in trouble, and people start to doubt the entire game.
Right. That's the problem with it. It's the game aspect of it, right? So you can look at democracy, you can look at voting as the same as sort of a Sunday afternoon NFL football game. The NFL doesn't care about the average voter, watcher, whatever you want to call them, who's going to show up at the polls, show up at the stadium, because the stadium's always going to be full. There's always going to be just enough people to fill the stadium, to show up, to make it look like the game is important, and that's all they need to do. They don't really care about the individual, and they really, if you're going to be against the system, they'd rather have you not participated in it at all, rather than give it over to somebody else. And so they don't care if you watch the game, they don't care if you tune in, they don't care if you buy a ticket, just like they don't care if you show up to vote. They don't care. It doesn't matter. The individual in this is so small in this bigger this bigger football game that they've got going on, that they put this show on every single day. I'm sure to you it's the same to me. It's really laughable. It's really kind of hard to watch. Because I'm 50 now, and I've been an anarchist all my life. I didn't necessarily always know what it meant to really be an anarchist, but I was always against the system. I always understood that there was something wrong with it. I always understood that individuals should have made, if there was going to be a system at all, it should actually pretend like it actually gives a damn about the things that make it a reality, the individuals that create it, and not, I try to, when I'm talking to statists, I try to do this a lot. I try to give them their system. All right, if you're going to have your system, but shouldn't everybody be playing by the rules that are put forth in it? Shouldn't it actually be the way that the system says it's supposed to be if you're going to play in it? And if it's not, then why are you doing it? Or why aren't you not doing it? Why aren't you doing something different other than feed this constant system? I guess it ends up being that case of what we're experiencing right now. what will happen is they're going to take and they're going to manipulate the electorate all the way up until the very last second of everybody voting, whether it's through the circus on the television of all these indictments and crimes that they're accusing each candidate or candidate's family of, at least the two big guys there, and they're going to keep moving the bar. They're going to keep changing the system. So you got all these guys running around right now talking about the voting system. You got some people on the left talking about, we have to lower the voting age to 16. We have to involve more people in the system to get them to participate in the system, to make them feel like they're a part of it. And then, of course, you have somebody on the right saying, well, that's just bringing in dumber, less experienced people to vote into the system, and that's not going to change anything. And what will change things is if you make those people pass the civics test and you make them understand, well, that our government is a three-tiered system and there's protections and blah, 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 and that's going to make better voters, is that they know who the first president was and how the president is elected. That's going to make them better voters, more informed voters. So it's just this constant game. They don't even pretend anymore that the system is something that we're all really truly a part of. They're always looking for the people who are trying to get elected are constantly looking for ways to kick other people out of the electorate, to move their district, or to change the voting age, or to put a test up there or something.
Yeah, and the current circus going on, luckily it has gotten so ridiculous that a bunch of people are now doubting the entire thing. But too many people, the current corruption and joke doesn't necessarily get at their fundamental belief in authority in government. They just think, we need reform. Like, well, who's going to do that? The crooks who are in there now. Well, what's the likelihood that that's going to happen? Well, none. Okay, so you're still clinging to a system that's doomed to fail. Yeah. But as long as they view the game as legitimate, like the number of times that, their own courts have said you totally weren't allowed to do that, like the mask mandates, you never had any authority to do that. This is within their paradigm, like you're talking about, within their rules. Like, I don't even believe in their rules. But inside their rules, even their own courts constantly tell them, you weren't allowed to do that, and you weren't allowed to do this thing, and you are allowed to do that, and we're just going to make up powers that never existed to begin with because they're part of the game anyway. And then people get caught, politicians on both sides constantly get caught doing just really slimy, horrible things. But none of that usually gets to the root of the authoritarianism in someone's brain, because they still think, well, this is why we need the right person in office. This is why we need to go out there and vote like third party or some other thing. And that's why I think it's so important to get people not to focus on whatever clowns are in the circus today, because in the long run, they don't stinking matter. I've said this before. It occasionally offends people. I don't care. The problem has nothing to do with Washington, D.C., or who's in the state capitals, and everything to do with what is between the ears of, 300-some million people, or 8 billion, if you're counting the whole planet. It is the belief system of the decent people that allows this game to happen. And when we stop falling for the ridiculous tricks, and hopefully Jones Plantation will help more people see that, the psychos have no power anymore. They're just lunatics whining in a corner about how important they are and saying they're king or something, and everybody just walks by going, I don't know what's wrong with him, but he doesn't matter because he doesn't have enforcers, he doesn't have taxpayers, nobody obeys him, he doesn't matter anymore because we, the people, stopped imagining him to have the right to rule. That's the actual solution.
I just love that image. I can picture any number of faces or places, but the general image is still the same. Just some sort of weird-looking dude in a tattered suit. Sort of, you gotta do this, and he's just standing on the street corner with his. He's as crazy as can be. LarkenRose.com. You can also follow Larken on Twitter or X or whatever it is that they're calling it these days, at Larken Rose, and then on Facebook at Larken.Rose.7, JonesPlantationFilm.com. Man, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. I always knew that we'd have a great conversation, and I'm really excited for the future that people like yourself really bring to anarchism, to voluntarism, to individualism, to freedom, and I really appreciate the work that you do, brother, and I wish you the best of luck and appreciate you taking the time to hang out.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on.
As for the rest of you, we will see you next week with the One-Armed Madman, and then Dr. Dean Lloyd in to end the month for us. Until then, take care.
You're listening to Real Talk Radio, only on the Republic Broadcasting Network.